On the campaign trail, Barack Obama decried the carried interest loophole for hedges and other private funds as folks who are doing very well paying lower rates than their secretaries. Now, though, however, the former president is using a nearly identical strategy to minimize his potential capital gains taxes to as low as 20%, almost half of what many ordinary working Americans pay. This is according to new reporting from investigative journalist Lee Fang, who joins us now to break it all down. Welcome back, Lee.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
You're right in describing it as, Obama's, a defining part of his presidency was talking about the carried interest loophole. He talked about it in many public addresses, in many, debates. It was in almost every single budget request he sent to Congress in his 8 years in office. And it was a defining part of how he got reelected. He vilified Mitt Romney for Mitt Romney's work as a private equity executive, using this loophole to minimize his taxes. But I obtained some very non-public information showing Obama's personal tax and kind of investment strategies. And Obama's essentially doing the same thing. He's structuring some of these deals that he's now engaging in as a private citizen as a profit interest share, meaning that if these businesses that he's working with generate capital gains, if there's a certain monetization event in the future, he will receive income that he can categorize as capital gains, paying only that 20% long-term capital gains tax rate. That's very low. That's, it's like about half of what a lot of working Americans pay. It's exactly what Obama condemned in very clear terms and moralistic terms as president.
Lee, you write in your piece that Obama pushed multiple times during his presidency to eliminate the carried interest loophole. Presumably there was some, legislative pushback to him being able to do so despite having a supermajority for some period of that time. What are we really talking about here? Is the argument that because he wasn't able to push it through while he was president mean that he should tell his tax guy, to give more money to the government just because that would be the ethical thing to do and not take advantage of the rules as they are currently? I mean, ethically, I would love a world where we had a wealth tax. I would love a world where the taxes weren't structured this way. But do you think that he didn't sincerely push for the rule change when he was in office because he wanted to take advantage of this? Or is this just the consequence of saying, hey, do my taxes to your accountant, who, of course, is in their professional capacity going to have you keep as much money as you can under the current system?
Well, that's a very good question. I think this story raises a few points along these regards. First, it's just Obama ran as a transformational character, someone who ran on hope and change, as a political outsider who would break up the kind of back-scratching culture of Washington, end the revolving door, hold business leaders accountable, really just take on the Wall Street and D.C. establishment. In many ways, this story just simply shows that, what he's engaging in here is legal. Nothing illegal that's, alleged in my reporting. It just simply shows that he's much more of a traditional politician. There are hundreds of politicians that come to Washington promising one thing and then doing another after they leave office. This simply shows that he's kind of just a traditional politician. He's not actually that much of an outsider. He's very, very normal. And in terms of his true motivations here, I don't want to get into that. I don't know. I think there was probably a very intentional attempt to close this carried interest loophole. The House of Representatives under his first term closed that loophole, and then it died in the Senate. There's been some talk of actual legal authority that the Treasury Department had to close this loophole without Congress. They could have taken executive action to, treat business income from hedge funds and private equity as ordinary income and, make them play by the same rules that banks and lawyers have to play by when they use a very similar kind of fee arrangement. Why are these hedge funds managers who are worth billions of dollars receiving hundreds of millions of dollars of income receiving this preferential tax treatment? There could have been executive action. The Treasury Department never moved on that. And I should note, both of Obama's Treasury secretaries, Tim Geithner and then Jack Lew, what did they do immediately after leaving the presidency? They both went to work for private equity funds that benefit from this loophole. So, this larger revolving door issue, I think, it just affects almost every administration. It's how everyone in DC gets rich. They either engage in a certain public policy position or refuse to engage and then go to a private sector actor that benefits from their action or inaction while in office, and they become very, very wealthy. Now, again, Obama is free to do anything he wants in his personal life, of course. But this is, I think, fairly hypocritical. As someone who really defined their presidency on this tax justice issue, he doesn't talk about it anymore. He doesn't talk about issues of tax justice now that he's still giving speeches. He's still a political figure. And secretly, quietly, in his own business deals, he's engaging in the same types of activities he really strongly condemned as president.
You describe him as still politically active. He's definitely, he's not quite in the game, right? He's more muted. He still gives speeches and travels and things, like he's making documentaries, that kind of thing. He's definitely not like a daily part of the news cycle, weighing in on Trump and Biden and all that, which I guess that characterized George Bush's post-presidency and maybe Bill Clinton's post-presidency as well. Does it show you? So you describe him as this being some evidence that he's a normal political figure. He certainly doesn't have, I think, a zeal to pursue progressive causes still the way that it seemed like he might when he was running. Am I missing that?
Well, look, he's not as active as he was, years ago. I don't know exactly how active he is. I know the public information that, he gave a big speech in the Bay Area at Stanford last year about, the alleged ills of disinformation on social media. He's spoken at some gun control events in the last year. He had his big inaugural Democracy Forum summit last fall where, he had some journalists and policymakers speak, in association with the Obama Foundation. And the kind of focus there was, again, on, some identity issues, hate, disinformation, voting rights. This is all well and good, but, for a lot of these more wealthy liberals, for politicians and activists that are funded by billionaires and, kind of part of this more neoliberal mix, they kind of hew towards liberal issues that don't upset the economic status quo. And that's not to say that the issues that Obama's now talking about aren't important. Sure, you can make that case, but they're not fundamentally changing the massive inequality we have in this country, the massive kind of political power structure where the very rich, the very powerful corporations in this country have a disproportionate share of the economy that kind of set the game in terms of how wealth and income are distributed. Again, he's not talking about these very essential tax justice issues where billionaires and millionaires, as he eloquently argued as president, are paying a lower tax rate than working class, middle class Americans. I still I'm sympathetic to the arguments that he made as president talking about these tax issues. I think they're very persuasive. It's just interesting that seems to have abandoned them, taken on these other liberal issues that don't have an economic component, and in his private life is now benefiting from the same tax strategies, or essentially the same. They're very similar. That he condemned.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is a trend that we've seen with a lot of faux populists across the aisle. I'm reminded of Donald Trump saying in 2016, "I'm smart not to pay his taxes," and saying, he said, "I know our complex tax laws better than anyone who's ever run for president, and I am the one to fix them." But our former colleague John Schwartz wrote this piece back at The Intercept back then, pointing out that it takes someone who's actually repentant to want to fix a system that they're benefiting from. And it seems that neither Donald Trump nor Barack Obama are actually invested in doing anything other than, in Trump's case, doing a $1.7 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly went to the wealthy, while just using the idea of knowing that there's a fraudulent system to sell themselves to a public who really does want more systemic economic changes that benefit working class people.
No, I think that's right, Bree. I was very kind of focused on the 2008 election. That was my first big election where I, started working as a professional in politics and media. covered the 2016 election. They are so similar. Obama's pitch to voters in 2008 and Trump's pitch to voters in 2016, running as populist outsiders, looking at the tax code, at our broken foreign policy, at this culture of Washington that I think so many people despise, that people see as corrupt, and promising big, bold change. And once they get into office, not really delivering on that change. I mean, it certainly animates voters because this is a message that resonates, that speaks to the complacency in politics, the inherent kind of corruption and unfairness in our system. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen the movement or the force or the kind of wave of politicians necessary to enact the changes that are promised in these election campaigns.
Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.